I have a real estate company with over 10,000 units, and I'm going to break down how we analyze a $100,000 property versus a $100 million property. And this is our COO, Brian Kearney. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks.
So what you guys need to understand is the process is the exact same. It's income minus expenses minus debt equals cash flow. And we always use the same thing. We use a property due diligence list. And if you want this, just click on the link below. You can have it for free. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go through this list. And you will see that the only difference between a $100 million property and a $100,000 property is just simply scale. So first, we're going to start with a $100,000 deal. Brian, as you know, this is the exact same process that you just did on 347 units in Henderson, Nevada. We're going to look at this exact property not far from here.
Parallels exactly what we did on a much larger project.
So the very first thing, we just went onto Zillow and we looked for a $100,000 property in the exact same submarket as the $100 million property that we're currently in escrow on, which we're going to go over in a second. So this property is 109.9, and it's obviously a mobile home, but it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,040 square feet. And if you take a look, this is at 2050 South Magic Way, space 175 in Henderson, Nevada. So if you can click on the photos, you can clearly see that this is a mobile home inside of a mobile home park. There's a few things you need to verify here, just like we do on a $100 million property. What would the rent be for this 2-bedroom, 2-bath? On Zillow, instead of for sale, you just click for rent. And you can clearly see that the houses in this area are renting for $3,000 to $2,500. Townhouses are renting for around $2,000. And we found a 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo that's older in this area that rents for about $1,500. So we're just going to assume for purposes that this 2-bedroom, 2-bath can rent for about $1,500. And this is an important piece because this would represent the market rent. Okay, we do the exact same thing on our big project, right?
Correct.
So except we do it times 347 units.
It's exactly what we would do, except instead of going to something like a Zillow, what we would do is we'd do a market survey. We'd go actually visit the properties. We'd understand what they're asking, like literally being on the ground, as well as use third-party commercial data and do a complete market survey. But the end result's the same thing. What are the rents?
And you're trying to verify your income here. And in this case, we're just trying to verify one rent. In our case of the larger $100 million property, we're trying to verify 347 of them.
Right. So we'd be looking for similar, what we call comps, which would obviously be apartment projects that are roughly the same age, roughly the same size, number of units, et cetera.
You got it, right? For purposes of this $109,000 unit, we're going to assume that the rents are $1,500. And what we can also do is you could take into any mortgage calculator you want and type in what would 20% down be on this. It's actually $21,800. So if we know that we're going to have to put down $21,800, we're now trying to solve towards a cash on cash, which is exactly what we do on a big project.
Right. That's exactly right. So now that you know what your down payment's going to be, you know how much you're going to have to get in debt, and that's going to help you calculate your debt service, and ultimately that's going to flow down to the cash flow.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to guess what the expenses might be on something like this. So for the mobile home, let's assume that the property taxes are $100 a month. Let's assume that the insurance is $100 a month. Let's assume that the HOA is $50 and maintenance is $50. So that way you've got about $300 a month in reoccurring expenses, plus the $700 in the mortgage, which we already know at 80% loan to value is about $1,000 a month of expenses with the mortgage payment. So let's just, again, break this down between income minus expenses minus debt equals cash flow. In this particular case, we know that our down payment is $21,800. And we also know that the rents are $1,500. And we also know that what we think our expenses are around $1,000. That leaves about $500 a month in cash flow. 500 times 12 is $6,000. But we also got to assume vacancy. So let's take a month out and make it $5,500. So if you're buying this property with 20% down and you have $5,500 of cash flow, you take that $5,500 and you divide it into the $21,800, which is your down payment, and you actually have about a 25% cash on cash.
That's pretty good.
So this deal actually looks pretty good, right? Now, again, hopefully maybe you could do better somewhere else, but a 25% cash on cash is pretty good. If you put $21,000 down, you rent the sink for $1,500. If you keep it occupied for 11 of the 12 months and our expenses are right, then we would probably go on some deal like this, right?
Oh,
we would say no,
absolutely.
go or no go. And that's where this due diligence checklist comes in handy, because you're following the same steps that we're following, except on a $100 million deal.
Yeah, you mentioned the scale issue. So, yes, exactly what we do here. And on a $100 million deal, there's a lot of data out there in the market that we can use to determine what our expenses are going to be. But ultimately, we get down to, it's the same process. We determine what the taxes are, the insurance are, the maintenance costs are, et cetera. And ultimately, we get down to what falls to the bottom line, and we look at our own cash on cash, and that's how we decide whether to move forward.
Right. And so for those of you non-believers, now we're going to flip over to the $100 million deal that we currently have in escrow, and Brian was quarterbacking the due diligence for this property as we speak. So let's take a look at that one. So, Brian, let's talk about this deal. It's 347 units in Henderson, also not far from the property we just looked at. That was $100,000. And we are in escrow on this deal for $90,750,000. And I know for a lot of you, that might sound like a lot of money, and it is, of course, but you can clearly see that just like a $100,000 deal, we have debt, we have equity, we have cash flow, except for we now have to walk all the units.
Correct. Yeah, the physical due diligence process is a very intensive process where we're gonna show up on property. Essentially, we bring an entire team of people from properties that we have around Texas and Arizona and elsewhere right to the site. We walk every single unit to check the condition of them. So, and while we're doing that, so that we can understand what kind of investment we may have to make when we turn units. When a tenant leaves and we get it ready for another one. We look at all the infrastructure in the building: mechanical, plumbing, electrical. We look at structural things like roofs, all the way down to cracks in the sidewalk, the foundation issues. We look at all of those things to determine if there are extraordinary expenses that we may have to incur that aren't obvious at that first level of due diligence that we've done as we've looked at what our rents are, what our expenses are, and what our purchase price is. And so we make a determination: is there anything out of the ordinary that we need to account for as we're evaluating this deal?
Right. And as you guys know, you're basically stepping into the seller's shoes. So whatever's there is going to be yours. Now, in the case of the $100,000 deal, it looked like a brand new mobile home. So you're probably not going to have as much as something that's, older. So the due diligence process becomes even more important as properties are older. But you'd be very surprised, as we walk units, sometimes we find vacant units that they're reporting as occupied.
Correct.
Sometimes we walk into units and you're wondering, there's just like a bed in the entire apartment, and that's it, and a book. I've actually seen that, a bed and a book, and that's it. So you got to wonder, who is this tenant? Do they even qualify? And did the seller put them in there just to make the occupancy higher? So there's a point to walking all the units. And also, you can see what you might need to spend on the interiors, and that's one of the most important things of walking the units, right?
Right, because you've got everything from carpet to appliances to lighting. Everything that is in that apartment at some point has to be either cleaned or replaced.
Right.
And that's what you're trying to determine is what's the cost going to be for me, the buyer, when I step into the seller's shoes in order to operate this property successfully and achieve the rents that we want to achieve.
Right. At the worst case, we found units that were completely cannibalized.
Oh, gosh.
Which means that the owners run out of money and they're using appliances and thermostats and things from a vacant unit to make other units rent ready. And so those are things that you find as you walk these units.
Yeah, you find an amazing number of things when you walk units, and it can really be an indication of the quality of the operations and the previous owner, and in terms of essentially the care, the love and care they put into it to ensure that the value of the asset is preserved.
But it's important to understand that just like a $100,000 property, $100 million property, it has debt, it has equity, it has expenses, and it has cash flow. So just like a $100,000 property, a $100 million property always has the same thing. As you guys can see, this is analyzed pretty easily with you got the income up above the green line, the expenses in the middle, and of course the debt at the bottom, which all results in cash flow, just like a $100,000 property. So up top, you will see things like loss to lease and vacancy and bad debt and concessions, those kinds of things. And in the middle, just like a $100,000 property, you'll see taxes, insurance, utilities, and payroll, and all the things that actually take away from the income. And then, of course, the debt. But it all boils down to the same thing. What is your cash flow based on the $40 million investment? Even though the property is $90,750,000, there's over a $40 million investment. And so the investors are looking for a cash flow. In this particular case, the first year is about $1.2 million, and then we're going to grow it to 1.5 and then 1.9. So you can see our plan to grow that over time. And you might have the same plan for a $100,000 property. But the point of the video is to show you the process is the exact same, whether it's a $100,000 property or a $100 million property. There's just more moving parts, right, Brian?
That's correct. And what you're looking for is you're looking forward in time. How am I, as the buyer, going to operate it differently than the seller operated it, so that I can increase rents over time and hopefully decrease expenses, or at least keep expense increases to a minimum. And so that can be things like different ways of staffing, different approaches to marketing, making actual physical improvements to the property, whether it's exterior or interior, all things that either drive rent or drive, keep expenses at a manageable level.
Yeah, and as you guys can see here, if you focus in on the loss to old leases number, you'll find that that's actually why we love this project. One, we are buying the property below replacement cost. But two, in year one, you can see the loss to lease is over $300,000, and it historically has been closer to $400,000. So what does that mean? It means that there's $300,000 of income sitting in the rent roll at today's market rents. And so in other words, if we can just capture that, this has nothing to do with vacancy. It literally means that each unit is well over $100,000 below market. That's what that means. If we just brought the units to market, our income would go up by $300,000. So that's why you could see that number declining over time. And so that was one of the reasons that we decided to buy this deal.
That's correct. And to have the double benefit of having the ability to buy it for less than replacement cost and have these very strong loss to lease numbers. So essentially, it's loss to the old lease because we're stuck in those leases for a period of time. And once those leases expire, now we have the opportunity to go rent those at market rent, which is going to drive up the actual rent and reduce the loss to old lease.
So, Brian, obviously when we buy anything, so much of it is about location, right? And we know this is in Henderson, Green Valley. I used to personally live in this area in Las Vegas. It's the higher end area of Las Vegas. It's near a Whole Foods. But we like this market because there's no new construction, right?
Correct. Yeah, Green Valley literally has no new construction. There's very limited opportunity for new construction moving forward. It's in a very high income area. It's one of the wealthiest zip codes in the Las Vegas area. There's new construction of single family homes that are extremely millions. Yep. So it's a great area.
Right. And what you always want is you want a big difference between the mortgage of a $2 million house and an apartment like this. You want that to be as big as possible, because what it does is it keeps the renters in the rentals. That's what you want when you're buying things for an investment. So if you guys are interested in this deal or any others, specifically this one, because we're closing by the end of the month, but if you want to take a look at this deal, just go to MC Companies /new deal. You'll see the business plan, but you do need to be accredited, but we will be closing this in the next 3 weeks. I'm sure this is overwhelming for a lot of people who just have a regular job. I used to be that way as well. And because of that, I just made a video on how you can realistically escape the rat race and quit your 9-to-5 job. You can check that out here.